everybody. Welcome to The Banish Zone, the show about flesh and blood with Bryn.
And Chris?
And today we have a guest, our very first guest, Matt, quote-unquote, Flake DeMarco. How are you doing, Flake?
I'm well. I didn't know I was your first guest. I feel
You're our very first guest. You're
okay.
the
Well,
inaugural.
the
Unless you
ribbon
count the
is
suit
cut.
of armor from episode 1.
Yes, the suit of armor.
He was more of a producer role, though. He didn't talk much.
Yeah, this is only episode 4, so you're getting in on the ground floor.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. I feel like this is some sort of crypto scam, but
That's
if I'm in
right.
at the ground floor, yeah.
Every
got, like-
episode of Banish Zone is an NFT.
Right. You just have to get 5 other people to be guests, and then if they get 5 guests, then soon enough, everyone signed up to the guest program.
Then
And
I'm
then-
rolling in it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
something will happen.
Yes, and you're here today to talk about Flesh and Blood as usual. And first thing I wanted to talk to you about, I've seen your show many times. I've watched you. We've met in person many
Mhm.
times, but I actually don't know specifically how you got into this game. So it's not
Oh.
something I generally want to ask guests in the future,
Mhm.
but I actually don't know you personally how you got into this game, because I know you have a long history of card games.
Yes. That is. I'm approaching that magical 25 years kind of
Oh my God,
Wow.
Disney extravaganza of being in card games.
that's the
Uh,
silver year or something.
is whatever it is. Either way, I'm releasing a special product that's going to cost $1,000.
Amazing.
And it's not tournament legal, but
It's going to
you
have
can
your face and a thumbs up on it.
Exactly, but you can't use it. That said, I've been in card games since I was like 12 or 13. And when I say that, I mean like actually playing the games and actively wanting to play them. But when it came to Flesh and Blood, that was sort of the last major card game that I really got into. If you don't count like Marvel Snap or something, but I was introduced to the game by a fellow card enthusiast who I met doing Gwent related things, a gentleman by the name of Lewis Woodhouse, aka What's Up Woody, who introduced me to the game
Is he What's Up Woody on
haphazardly.
Twitter?
What's that?
He's What's Up Woody on Twitter?
He is
Okay.
What's Up Woody on Twitter, as far as I know. But Woody got me into the games. I saw him talking about it, and he ended up streaming a little bit of it on TTS, and I casually entered into his channel just to say hello, and I was like, oh, what's this? And he gave me the rules and said, you know what, this merits a little bit of investigation. And I was a little bit tired of MTG. I was playing a lot of Magic prior to that. I got in 2018 into Magic, and I'm very
okay.
close friends with Alias V, one of the Magic casters, so we used to play a lot. But I kind of got tired of what the meta was in Magic. I was sort of on the downswing of that game, and I wanted something to fill that, or to scratch that paper itch, as it were. So I
Right.
gave this a shot, and oh my goodness, like it was just everything I kind of wanted. And the more layers I peeled, the more I discovered how deep it was. Where the first exposure to the game for me was, I'm like, oh, this seems very basic, but we'll give it a
Oh,
shot.
interesting.
Well, I mean, on the surface, it seems like the standard framework of 2 health totals, attacks going back and forth. There's no like creatures or minions or whatever on the board. There's no real permanence. But the standard framework of the game didn't really grip me, because it was the same thing: attack, a life total. So there's going to be aggro, there's going to be control, there's going to be combo / fatigue. It seemed like that kind of whole thing. But it was when I started to really dig into the heroes and the nuances of them that it really kind of gripped me, and then I was all in, and that's basically what happened. I got in at Monarch Unlimited was when I really just
Monarch.
Okay.
jumped in.
Interesting.
So you started as a player, and then you immediately. So your history of casting started with Gwent, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Which is an only digital card game.
That's correct.
And then you decided, okay, well, I love this game, so I'll immediately become a caster for this game.
Well, so I mean, I wish it was that simple, that it was just like
So easy.
I had that kind of exactly. I had that agency to just be like, I am a caster for this now, and just snap my fingers.
One casting job, please.
Yeah,
Giving
that's
away.
it. Like off of a menu somewhere. I wish that was the case. That this is my profession, and this is what I do for a living. Um, not without a lot of early toil and effort, but I went from sort of the what I call the entertainment industry, where I
Sure.
was bartending and performing flair bartending and stuff like that for many years, like for 4 or 5 years. That's how I paid my bills. I kind of got tired of that lifestyle. I got my degree. I went to go to the corporate world. I got a job in Toronto in communications management at like a major airline.
Oh,
And yeah, like the thing about it was like, frankly, the stability was very attractive to me, like the regular
sure.
paychecks and all that.
Mhm.
But
Going into the office,
yeah,
punching the clock.
and that wore thin very quickly. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, the money was great. My career was on a very like positive trajectory. Uh, but the problem is like when you wake up every morning wanting to kill yourself, like it was
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
difficult to get out of bed and go do that whole thing. And a lot of it was along the lines of you're in an I don't want to say an old person's game, but you're basically surrounded by dinosaurs who do things the same way and have been doing things the same way. And people with like myself with personality who want to inject personality into what they do, that rub people the wrong way, but
Oh,
not
dude.
Mhm.
everybody. It just so happens that there was a lot of, well, maybe you should tone it down or maybe you should do this. And I was in communications and it was hard. It's hard to, you know, dial it back when you're me.
That's tough because I mean, like, I work in electrical engineering, and like I never really had an office job until I was like in my late 20s, and it was people were not happy with the way I behaved like most of the time. And luckily I was like in the lab and I didn't have to interface with most people, but even then I would get in trouble sometimes just for swearing constantly, or like you'd have to interface with you know marketers or people, and yeah, it's tough. It's really
Oh,
tough to
yes.
like, they want you to behave like you're not a person.
Part of my job was actually to so in Canada we had three major bases where we would train flight attendants, and I would go twice a year to each of those bases because I was part of their training curriculum where I had to train them on how to properly use social media while representing the company, like the do's and don'ts. And I was wedged between um I was usually wedged between like a 1 hour thing about how to properly do your ponytail and
Oh my god.
and like that kind of stuff. And the other one was like how to maintain your like passports and like foreign documents, like, and keep those up to date. So it was really dry and boring stuff. And like I would come in and like kick down the door like of the saloon and fire my
Hello.
yeah, and be like, "What's up, bitches?" And what was great was like my whole presentation was this is like it was like a 30-minute PowerPoint where it was all Star Wars clips and like Simpsons clips and stuff like that. And I was again, the first thing to do to get people's attention is to just drop an F bomb and they're like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
guy means business." And then I would have conversations and I wasn't, it wasn't just a PowerPoint of boring stuff. It was like, here's an idiot that fucked up their Instagram account because they
Uh-huh.
did XYZ. The amount of stories I have are obscene because uh but that said, that whole lifestyle didn't jive with me.
Was trash.
And
Mhm.
I in that process I was also doing a lot of streaming card games, Gwent and whatever. And eventually Gwent offered me like a contract for a year saying, "Hey, we want you to do all of our events for the next year. It pays X per event. We have X amount of events." And I did the math and I'm like, "Okay, this pays the rent and the bills and allows me to like give this a go." I was making easily a third of what I was making at the other job, but
Sure.
the
Yeah.
happiness factor was like infinitely more.
You're having a lot of
So
fun doing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then so like when it comes to Flesh and Blood, I had like 4 or 5 years in the bank of doing events and casting card games. So when you say something like, oh, like jumping
No,
into
no,
it,
yeah.
no, I'm not saying that like it was like that's what your thought process is. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get at is um there was like I think I estimated that before I got my first paycheck for casting or any type of broadcasting, I had put in about 2,000 hours of broadcasting, be it
Sure.
streams or events that I did for free or whatever. Um, so the whole Flesh and Blood aspect, I was basically it took Channel Fireball taking a chance on me and
Mm,
other references
Mhm.
coming through to sort of support me for them to say, "All right, we'll give this random fringe card game streamer a chance to cast this cool card game and see how it goes." And that's where that kind of dug in. But when I say that like this is what I've like broadcasting it is what I do, I mean, it's legitimately that's what pays the bills. Like every single
right.
day is preparing for that or marketing or trying to maintain relevancy in
Yeah.
in in the sphere.
Yeah, so it's interesting because to me, Flesh and Blood is my first card game ever, and so to me, I don't know any Magic streamer or casters. I don't know what else there would be. I don't even know.
There's like YouTubers, I
But I mean,
guess.
I don't even know like StarCraft streamers or Smash Brothers casters. Like
Mhm.
I don't know anybody. So to me, you are the face of the Flesh and Blood casting because you were the first guy I saw, and so it's interesting to me that you are like in your mind a random guy who like got to a place and now you seem like the leader of that team. But then it's funny because when Brian Gottlieb came in, everyone had this like reverence for
Mhm.
him, where it was like, oh, he's a guy who you should know. And I was like, I have no idea who this guy. He's
Oh,
cool.
He
I
has what, like
love I love
30,000
Gottlieb.
followers or something?
Yeah,
Like,
he's like a big name,
it's just
and
well,
Magic is huge, yeah, so if you have a following in Magic, you're kinda big.
think about somebody like Doa, like Eric Lundqvist. Like this is a an
I have no
absolute
idea who that is.
well,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
the thing. Is like he's a legend in the industry. The amount of this is
Mhm.
somebody with like 100,000 followers, like somebody who has been there when streaming and esports was in its infancy, when it's like literally in its birthing state, like he was there doing all this stuff. And
Mm.
oh,
people would come up to me and be like, Doa? I'm like, Eric? I'm like, yeah. I mean, like we play cards together, and like not knowing anything about his background in League of Legends or in StarCraft and whatnot.
mhm.
And I, like you, it was in the same way. I was only familiar with people within my own sphere because you know, uh, and maybe it's to my own detriment, but at the same time, if there's something that doesn't interest me, I'm not one to go and explore it just for the sake of exploring it. So I never played League of Legends, so I never knew about it. I never really followed competitive StarCraft or whatever. I knew Hearthstone people, like
Yeah.
that's what I knew
Mhm.
because that's what I played. I knew Gwent and Gwent community. I knew a bit of the Magic community later on, but I get it, and it is flattering for you to say, honestly, like when you say that I'm the face of it. I don't particularly think of it that way. Like the oddest thing happened literally today where Mara of like Blackwing Studios, we were just chatting and she's like, well,
Love Mara.
it's
Shout out
yeah,
Mara.
Mara's awesome, by the way. But she mentioned she's like it's so something about like it's something about having friends that are celebrities, and I was like, who are you talking about? And she's like, well, like you. I said, dude, that don't in any way, shape, or form think that I'm not within the same kind of scope of other people. I just happen to do a job within the game that that it's
Lends to
maybe is
people, yeah.
Mhm.
It's
unique.
a
And
weird
There's a
feeling. I mean,
camera on your
like
face and there's a microphone, so whatever you say gets picked up and then people
yeah,
see it, but
that's
yeah.
dangerous.
yeah, it's happening right now, actually.
Yeah.
No, it's a very weird feeling because I have friends who I walk around my neighborhood sometimes and, like, once or twice, someone has, like, recognized me from my band. And like, "Oh, you're in Stay Inside." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, hey," and, like, people are like, "Whoa, you're famous." And it's like, that never happens. It's happened, like, maybe 2 times. You just happen to be standing here. Like, nobody knows my band. Like, it's a very small group. But it's when there's a small group of people who know and like your work, it can feel, like, outsized
Mhm.
and strange.
It only takes a couple encounters where someone is like, "Hey, that shirt is from this band. I know that band.
Yeah.
Are you Bryn from that
Or
band?"
or,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're like, I love Flesh and Blood. You're a Flake."
Mhm.
And that's, like those are you know what I mean? Like, it's a really interesting it's hard to deal with, I think. Do you feel that it's been interesting going to Worlds? Like, has that experience been something you'd been used to, or you feel like you're getting used to it, or, the Pro Tours?
Well, the hardest part, frankly, is just sort of reconcile the fact that like people, for instance, like what Mara said, or like what you guys are saying too, is that oh, like you're like the way that someone has said it is like you're card game famous. Like within the confines
Yeah,
of
for
whatever
sure.
Yeah.
convention center, people will know who I am. But the second I walk out of there,
You're
like
nobody.
I'm, yeah, and not that I demand. I don't walk in and be like, I have arrived. Shower me with reverence. Like that's
Yeah.
not how that happens. I like there's nothing that separates me, in my opinion, from, for instance, somebody like Sam Dando at MinMax Games, who is supporting the community and running contests and giving people good deals on cards that they need and supporting it. There's nothing that differentiates me from, let's say, somebody like Az of Go Again Gaming, or yourselves who are making content
Mhm.
and are
Mhm.
supporting the game. I just happen to do it in a way that maybe pays better. Like, I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
it's also so visible.
right. But when I walk into a place like that and people want to talk to me, that is more so a tribute to the fact that the games community itself is just good and that we're all friends. And I'm glad that people don't have any hindrances when it comes to approaching me, because I want to be approached and spoken to. Other than when I'm at it, again, I've mentioned this on multiple podcasts actually. If I'm on a
Yeah.
urinal and I'm peeing, don't please
Yeah.
grant me the 30 seconds of relief, and then we can
Just
talk.
as a broad
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
general
I think
thing,
yeah.
dude.
I from what I understand, boys do not like being talked
If a
to
person's
in
using a urinal, you can wait till
the
maybe
bathroom.
maybe washing their hands, like when you're washing up or drying your hands
Yeah,
It's
together.
it's
that's
it's
the
a
move.
different story in the women's bathroom where all the cosplayers are taking off their costumes and we're all talking like it's totally normal
Mhm.
apparently, but
Sure. I mean,
in
But
also, like, the women's bathroom at Flesh and Blood events is probably pretty empty
it's mostly
a lot of the
cosplay.
time. It's the cosplayers, yeah.
just like this, yeah, fortress of solitude, I would imagine for many.
Yeah.
But um yeah, that's kind of like the whole thing is like, please, I like to be spoken to and approached and asked questions and whatever. And a lot of people have a lot of kind things to say, and it truly does mean a lot to me when people come up and say, hey, like I appreciate what you do and such. And that's all I want to do is not I don't want to be famous. I want to be known for being a positive force in the community to a degree, because I've been in
Yeah.
communities that have just devolved into degeneracy and toxicity, and I hate
Mhm.
that. And it's like, and I can feel it kind of eventually seeping into my own skin, where it does eventually kind of tug at certain strings and decision trees where you're like, I could say this or I could say this, and this is pretty spicy. So being in this sphere, and I'm not saying that Flesh and Blood is completely void of bad apples, but I try to be a bastion of goodwill and positivity. And when people come and want to talk to me, that is their time that they're investing in me and have invested in me prior,
Mhm.
because they wouldn't know me unless they've listened to my stuff and consumed one of. And like some people come up to me and say, "Hey, you talk too much." I've gotten that. I've
Well,
gotten that many.
it's
I've
your
gotten that multiple
job.
Yeah.
times. Yeah. And that exactly. But again, like when I tell people, I said I have no real applicable skills in life other than speaking. So please let me have this, and that's where it goes. But to be said that I'm famous, I still can't reconcile it, because for whatever good that I do in the Flesh and Blood community, there are people who do as much or more who might not get the same recognition, and I can't kind of come to terms with accepting sort of this kind of praise and kind words
Right.
when there are people who don't necessarily get their fair share. So it still feels awkward to me. Don't get me wrong, it's still very
No, yeah.
flattering, but I still kind of sit on the sidelines and being like, like, like it certainly pumps my tires for sure, but I still kind of it always leads me to think about the other people in the community who might not get the same adoration.
In recognition.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're talking about the community of this game. Is something a lot of people have a lot of words to say about. It's just constantly being brought up on every uh podcast or piece of media I ever watch about it. Especially recently, you were on Tommy Tommy Fresh's podcast talking about
Thomas. Good old
Mr.
Thomas
Mhm.
von
Thomas,
Freshness.
Mr. Freshness.
beautiful man.
Yeah. What
Um,
did he wear at the Pro Tour? He had like a
a big
like
sign.
a booth with a oh yeah, it was just a big Fresh and Bud sign
Yeah,
walking
yeah.
around with a microphone.
Interviewing people.
Yeah, yeah.
Great guy.
Mhm.
Um,
Lovely man.
but you were talking about like what you were thankful for, and you guys were both talking about how thankful you are for the community. And I, you know, again, I don't know anything about card games, but it seems like people don't really know much about, or people are very uniquely floored by this particular community. And I've been trying to figure out why it is, because it does seem to be a little different than just that it's small. Because there is
Mm,
a certain like early internet like forum thing, like when a forum is really small and like everyone's
Yeah.
happy and everything's
Oh.
running, and then and then it like gets bigger, and then a bunch of trolls come and
mhm.
it starts sucking.
You got noobs, yeah.
And I feel like that's always a possibility, and Flesh and Blood as it gets bigger will become less good in terms of community and less tight knit, I
Mhm.
suppose.
Yeah. I mean, we've even seen that just in
But I
in
do
Talishar, like, people being salty when they're behind the anonymity of a
right,
screen.
but that's the thing about Flesh and Blood is that it's not always it'll not be online.
Right.
It's never gonna be
You'll
online.
always have to play in person.
So I guess is that sort of what you think the main thing is that we're a group of people who want to be in person and want to play games in the Flesh and Blood, or do you think there's something else? Did we just get lucky?
I don't think it's definitely not luck because I don't think anything I've ever associated with has ever had a good luck kind of. It's usually my whole life is just a bad moon, like hovering over me at all times. But
The Bad Moon
um,
Rising.
yeah, and when it comes to Flesh and Blood, I think that there's multiple factors in terms of why people would say that hey, the community here is super positive, and I hope that it is sustainable forever because it's a good thing. That's a
It's a
great thing,
great
and
time, yeah.
Mhm.
it is, but like like if I were to sort of use an analogy here, it's like having I've streamed on Twitch for many years, and what I've noticed is that if you're not policing and setting the culture of positivity and good people and nice things and whatever and positivity whatever, if you're
Right.
not weeding out the toxicity yourself and sort of conditioning the people who like you to also do that, then it kind of rolls out of control. But as things grow, it becomes harder and harder to keep track of that thing. So I find that it has to do with the fact that yeah, it's still a small community. And the community I think that have jumped into Flesh and Blood from a competitive standpoint have come from games where that have already established themselves, like Magic, for example, and those who have jumped ship are not are partially jumping ship because they might be tired of what the other game is doing from a design
Mhm.
standpoint, but it also might be the fact that they're just tired of the negativity of the particular community and they want to just disassociate from it and try something new and bring with them only the you know the luggage carrying the happy memories as it were.
Yeah, yeah.
But as time goes by and as the groups expand, there are going to be more and more people who are there to rock the boat. And as the game becomes more globally renowned, as the legitimacy of the game continues to solidify, there are going to be outside detractors of the game who are going to criticize and look to poke holes. And we've seen it already. We saw it with the whole shredding of the tunic fiasco, where
Mhm.
people who I mean, look, I'm not, and this is not me to call out names because the people who started this stuff, I have no relationship with them. I've consumed some of their content and read some of their tweets, and they have make good points and they make bad points. Nobody should be like considerably judged on one opinion that they have necessarily, but that
Sure.
opinion was completely asinine in the sense that you know, it's like regardless, we can go past that,
Yeah,
but
no, the shredding was stupid.
Yeah.
yeah, but
It's fine. It's but and the thing is like those people are incentivized to do that for clicks, right? Like
Mhm.
well,
they
yeah,
to have a big reaction and to be like, "Oh, look at this horrible thing," just so that they can have more views or whatever.
right, and it just makes me laugh that a prod like literally off the heels of that whole thing, like 6 months later, Magic announced,
Magic 30
yeah, Magic the $1,000 box of cards that are not tournament legal,
of
and you're
proxies.
Yeah.
exactly. So, it just made me laugh in that regard that that was what came off the back of it and whatever, but it's been put to bed and no one's talking about it and nobody cares.
Right.
The whole thing is that as a community grows and becomes more takes a bigger chunk of the pie in terms of people's awareness and their bandwidth, like people are gonna it's not that it's that like the people who are not necessarily in the community that grows, it's going to start to rub up and cross pollinate into what their life is, because people who they might not give a shit about Flesh and Blood, but their friends might, because the game's growing. They might hear more about it, and that might then sort of it might inspire more opinions to be vocalized versus just bury them in your thoughts. And some of those might be negative. So it's just a consequence of a growing community. And frankly, it's up to the community to police and weed out and call out that bullshit. And that's
Right.
something that
Yeah.
I do all the time, is try to set the tone in that regard and say that positive, like, there are negative aspects of things and they need to be called out, sure, but not everything is a fucking disaster, you know?
Right. And the point of the game is to be a game that we can all play together and have fun with. And like, y- it's okay if something annoys you. Don't be an asshole. Like
Sure.
that concept is really hard online. And I do think that a
Mm.
part of what's good about Flesh and Blood is that like so many of the people who are just, you know, aren't even content creators, who are just fans of the game, are kind of also big names within the game. Like there's people on like we were just talking about Mara. Like she does a thing that's very valuable and cool, but I don't know if she necessarily thinks of herself as a content creator. She's not like a face of the game, but everyone knows her and likes her because she's nice and involved, and when we
Mhm.
go to the pro tour or worlds or a calling or whatever, you can go and be like, oh hi, like you're a real person, and we understand there's someone actually behind the screen even when it
Yeah.
is online.
Well, there's consequence to it, because again, like, if the whole game was done online and you had never left your cave to that degree, you never face the consequences. And trust me, there are people who have said things, and like I said, everybody's entitled to their opinion. You could call me names, you can say whatever the hell you want, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a time perhaps where we cross paths, and you better be on, like, you best believe that you're going to pay the tab on that. Whether I'm not, I wouldn't,
Absolutely.
like, and that's the fact. And and it's hilarious to me, because when people say things that they think are are not heard by, content creators or personalities in the game or whatnot, and then I'll casually bring it up. I'm like, oh yeah, but you said this about me. And they're like, oh. And it's like, yeah, it's cool. I'm like, I don't, like, that's your
But
opinion, I
that's
don't
who you
care.
are. You have
Yeah.
to live with
You
that
said
now.
that, yeah.
You
Well,
said it.
that's it. And trust me, and it's funny, because there are people out there who will openly criticize, be it in, like, Twitch chats, like, while we're casting and stuff like that, and actively shit on us, and
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
try to be all buddy buddy, on through social media, and it's like, dude, I'm like, I'm not, I'm never gonna, like, outwardly attack you or whatever, but just know, like, at the end of the day, when we're out together, I'm like, I'm not gonna, I don't want to hang out with you or whatever. Like, I
Yeah,
don't,
why would I respect your
yeah.
opinion when you
But
treat me like
but at the
this?
same time,
Mhm.
it's like one of those things where I'm like, I'm not gonna spend any effort to try to retaliate or whatever. But at the same time, like, it's still there. It's like, it's just
Mhm.
okay. Like, this is somebody who has said XYZ. I just don't want to deal with them. And I've always been, in all my years of content creation, I have never collaborated with somebody that I did not think was a good person. And this goes back to Gwent, and it comes back to, like, Flesh and Blood. If I don't agree with somebody's personality or stance, I'm not going to hypocritically jump in there and be like, yeah, this person's great because I need clicks and I need views and I need
Mhm.
whatever. Like, there's a
Yeah,
certain
yeah,
amount of
yeah.
integrity that I like to maintain. If I have somebody on the podcast who has an opinion that I don't agree with, doesn't mean that I don't like them. It just means that I don't share their opinion. But there are people who actively go out there and look to tear down so that they look better by comparison, but that's
Right.
Mhm.
not. And so everybody I associate with, really good people, everybody tries to support one another, and that's what I'm out here trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that Flesh and Blood, or LSS in general, has had, you know, I'm not going to name any names, but there has been one situation I can think of where they were like, you aren't in the game anymore. Like, you are not someone in the community that we
Right.
want to deal with, because they were like actively being shitty.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a really important thing, like you're saying, not just for the community to moderate, but like the company as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was a store, right? It was like the store is no longer like can sell flesh and blood
There was
because
a
of
store
your
and
actions.
I think a content creator too, and like
Mhm.
that's something that can happen, and it's like if you're only driven by like who has the most views or who has the most money, like you're going to end up encouraging behavior that might not be good for you in the long run.
Well, that's the thing, and that's where integrity kind of comes to a head again. And I can't speak on behalf of LSS or anything like that. It's
Oh, of
more
course not.
so a matter of like I think I know who you're talking about, at least from the content creator perspective. The thing about it is like I don't know who that person is. I've never interacted with them. I don't know any
Mhm.
of the
Right.
history of them. So, which was interesting. The only time I figured out, or I ever it came to light for me, was like I had James on the podcast, and when I was fielding community questions, some of the questions I got were like, "Ask James why this person is banned." I'm like, "No." I'm like, "I don't
It's none of
care."
your
And
business.
yeah, I'm not going to waste James's time.
Uh,
I have 8 questions I can ask him. I'm not going to ask him why,
God, is it
Joe
is
yeah.
that few?
oh man.
8 questions?
Well, no. So we have like at least from the structure, this old structure of Instant Speed podcast was like, I think it was like 45 minutes of discussion, 40 to 45 minutes discussion, and 15 minutes of like rapid fire questions.
Oh yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
I used to purely by the fact that like the graphic I used to like was was like 4 lines of text. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to do 12 questions and 4 is too few. So it's whatever multiple of 4 makes sense. So it was like 8
Yeah.
questions to keep it clean and keep my silly brain satisfied. So that was it. And anyways, the point is like I wasn't, like people are gonna say their shit and do whatever. And then like it takes a lot for somebody to get pushed out of a card game, I would imagine. And like if
Yeah.
you're
Mhm.
spreading lies and bullshit, I don't know the details, so I'm not gonna necessarily comment. But I'm gonna comment
No,
on
yeah.
saying like if there's excessive amounts of falsehoods and bullshit and like slander, then yeah, fuck it, like own it.
Mhm.
Right,
Like
exactly.
that's the case. Just own it. Say it. You can say it. No one's stopping you, but you got to own it.
There is consequences.
Yeah, definitely. That aspect is important in like in terms of the whole community too, that there's like a feedback and that there's consequences if you do something negative or something that is going to cause problems in the community. And I feel like there's sort of an element of that for like the players too, that it's like if somebody is rude to a new player or if somebody is like if someone's too salty, it's like people will kind of look
People
at
notice and they get roasted too.
right, that's the thing. It's like I was
Like,
because we were
there's
talking earlier about like playing online, and it's like you can get as salty as you want on your computer, and maybe not even like be salty in chat, just like inside your heart, you're feeling really salty. But people can tell when you're salty at an armory, and at a certain point, it's like you're being rude if you're salty for too long.
Well, I mean, and this is like it's not just content creators. There are pro players that when I was new to the game were very dismissive and didn't give a like were very like actively kind of arrogant and pompous to me
Mhm.
and such like that. Like when I had just started the game. So I was
Oh,
a
really? Like,
relative
"Haha, I
like
win, fuck you."
like my first armories, like my
Oh,
first
okay.
armories, like and I'm talking like prominent pro like well placing players that
Mhm.
again, and I give everybody the benefit of them. Like everybody has bad days. Maybe I walked in and and whatnot, but like the multiple times that I would interact with these people to the simple elements of just asking questions about rules where I was just ignored or dismissed or
Hmm.
told to ask somebody else because they just don't have time. Like
Huh.
Weird.
legitimately things like that. And I say I'm like it's kind of like a three strikes and you're out policy. I'm like everybody has bad days and whatnot,
Yeah.
but there are players out there who I just actively don't give a fuck about. Like
Hmm.
I legitimately wish them well, but again, I never want to collaborate with them. I would and
Hmm.
I if they ever wanted to ask me to do something, I would probably not do it unless I was compensated. Like I would treat it as a
Right.
business as a bit
Mhm.
like I'll go on any podcast of anybody who asks me. But if you've treated me like shit or been that way, then it becomes okay, you are hiring me for my time. I will treat it as a business endeavor. But
Damn.
in
Wow.
that
Yeah.
yeah, and but that shit carries over, and like I'm not out
Absolutely.
Mhm.
there trying to tear these people down. I'm not even going to say their names.
Of course.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
merely a matter of all right, this is who you are, And it's funny because after I started casting and became a little bit more prominent, their whole fucking
Vibe
way that they
shifted.
treated me completely changed. And I was
Oh.
like, "All right, cool, no problem. Absolutely." But it happened with an LGS that I no longer go to,
Hmm.
Mm,
and it happened with players that play out of that particular LGS. And I'm like, "Cool." Which
yeah.
is
Now you
just
know the
to sort
score.
of I just want to close it out and say one of those people has kind of softened, and I've sort of started to speak this person again, and I'm happy to say that we are at least amicable. They sent me a message and said some really nice things, and him and I are at least friendly in that regard. But the other
Nice.
ones, I'm like, fuck that noise.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I wanna be a part of creating a community that is about, like, hey, if you recognize you were being shitty, like, you can always apologize. You can always, like, redeem yourself, you know? There it's not it's not the end of the world,
Mhm.
but, you know, don't expect everyone to be nice to you if you're putting shit into the world, you know? Yeah, so you started we said you said earlier you were starting, card games really early. The communities must have just completely changed in the 25 years you've been playing games, but do you feel like as a kid it was something that got you into card games? Was the fact that you could go and meet people and be around people in person and do something fun? Or was it the gambling and the nerd and the the aesthetics? Is it all everything? Like how did it work for you?
I wouldn't say it was the gambling necessarily, even though the what occupied most of my time between like when so my first game that I really started playing and collecting and thinking about was Star Wars CCG in like the late 90s and
Oh,
whatnot. I
Yeah.
right,
wasn't
yeah.
even into Magic, but I didn't get into it. Like I was a teenager. I was like 12 or 13 years old when I got into it. I didn't get into it because I was looking for communities to get into because there's no internet. I didn't have really access to internet or anything like that. I would just I had two or three friends from my high school that were also that got into it with me, and it was like, okay, on Fridays after school, we would go to the card store. And I feel like I pioneered the playing at the card store. I don't know. It's just me. Like also studying at coffee shops. That was me. I
Yeah,
started
yeah.
that like
Really? Oh,
20
wow.
years ago. I totally
I
started that.
used to do that all
That
the
was me.
time.
Yeah, that
That's
was
amazing.
absolutely me. No one did it until I did it.
Yeah.
Um,
They
but
used to call it
that it,
pulling a flake, but then they dropped that name.
yeah,
Before Starbucks.
Yeah.
before the whole Starbucks sitting down
Mhm.
with your, your laptop open and doing whatever the fuck you
Pretending
do
you're
there, but
working, yeah.
Mhm,
correct. Meanwhile,
yeah.
you're texting and doing all that shit. Um, but for I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but you're gonna have to bleep some of
You
this
are,
stuff
Please
out.
it's
swear.
fine, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um, that's kind of what got me into it was not the community, but it was just a matter of it was Star Wars. I adored Star Wars. I loved strategy games. I played a lot of StarCraft. So this was a different sort of type of strategy game, and just hanging out with two friends that I really really loved. A friend of mine by the name of Chris, who's also does some content creating stuff. He goes by the name Christo, and another friend of mine
Christo.
named Jed, who just doesn't he does his own thing, but he still likes card games, so he does his own thing. But those are the two that I played Star Wars with religiously, and our tournament scene, our competitive scene, we only entered one tournament ever in like the 4 or 5 years that we played through high school. We only did one tournament, and it was a shady, smoky basement, so like where we had to ask our parents to drive us there, and my parents who didn't know anything about this culture or whatever, and I didn't either. They dropped me off and they came to pick me up like an hour and a half later, 2 hours later, thinking that that was enough time to. So I
Oh, no.
played I played like 2 games and then I had to forfeit the rest
Oh,
and
Oh,
because
no.
I
man.
was going home, right. So that was kind of my interested, but now my interest is not necessarily about competing. It's more so about just being amidst the community, broadcasting card games and supporting and celebrating what card games are, which are it's friendly competition, it's expression of personality and that and just the supporting nature of what the community is. These people
Yeah.
like you are my friends. Like I don't know how to properly articulate this where people won't laugh at me like that, but I mean it's the truth. I live in Toronto. I don't have many, if any, close friends here at all. Like all my friends that live in the city are, they're busy. Like they're teaching at universities. They have real jobs, and I say real jobs, but but I
Yeah.
moved away from Montreal where all of my family and all of my friends growing up live. I moved here, and now my only outlet is talking through this media and through this format and through this, so when I go to these events, when I invest in this game, it's it also is to a certain degree selfish because it's how I maintain friendships and how I stay happy and stay engaged and stay, buckled into this planet hurling through space.
Yeah. And I mean, but I see a through line there. You were hanging out with your 2 friends who you still know, like, it's not like a large community, but, like, that's a part of it. Like,
Mhm.
if you were completely alone and it might have been a lot harder if no one talked to you to be into the Star Wars CCG, you know?
Well, Chris got married last month, and I was in his wedding party, and there was no best man. There was four groomsmen, and we each had a role. Like one of them signed the document as a witness. Another one was
Mhm.
like the one holding the rings and doing that. Another one did, and I was the one obviously who gave the speech. That was my thing. And Chris and I talked about how his dating life was as turbulent as mine had been. And I said, when all looked bleak, you top decked a real one. And like that was like, but it came back to card games, which was nice. And
Yeah.
so there was, yeah, the through line exists. It just happens that my network is, you know multiplied exponentially, and I've met people that I love just as dearly. So
Yeah. And I find that really interesting because my sense of community has always been through music. I've been in bands my whole life. Um, and so I've never really thought of, I mean, I was into comics and stuff, but that never really felt like comparable. Just like
Mhm.
other nerd stuff wasn't.
It's kinda hard to, like, go to a shop and, like, read comics
Yeah,
with
you
other people.
sometimes meet somebody who's into the same things you're into, but like
Mhm.
there's no pattern, there's no goal you're working towards. There's
Mhm.
no it's not as ground isn't as fertile. And I feel like having been into this card game for a year, I'm really astounded by how easy it is to make friends with people who you really only have this one thing in common with.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you're into the game enough, there's endless things to talk about. If you just wanna talk about
Yeah.
decks and building and, our community is very much like, we'll go on Tuesdays to our local game store and we play the Armory, but then usually some people will also stay afterwards, we smoke weed outside, and then we jam more games and we talk about the game. And that's
For
sometimes the most
hours.
fun part is when you're just, like, shooting the shit, talking about the event, maybe talking about who won, talking about what decks you're trying to build, the new sets coming out, the
Yeah.
new meta, whatever.
And as an adult who doesn't really drink, like it's it's hanging out in a way that I haven't since my 20s. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, a thing to do on a Tuesday night.
it's the most fun. Is the best part to me is that first night that you arrive in a city, you check into the hotel for an event, and everybody's just kind of gooning around in the lobby. And some of them
Yeah.
are playing games, some of them are just shooting the shit, and you're just like, all right, well, I'm gonna have a pint, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna whatever, and it's like, all right, cool. Like that is as rewarding for me as calling a final that was like an obscenely cool lethal that somebody pulled off, with a very obscure deck.
Yeah.
Like to me, that satisfaction of I feel just as accomplished when I know that I casted a good match as I am when I'm like, dude, I just crushed that supper with my friends. Like I went out there, we ate, we had a good conversation, we talked, everyone like I know what's going on in my friends' life. Like it's the same kind of
Yeah.
good feeling, fulfillment. It's professional mixed with personal, and I could not ask for anything better. And like to me, just to sort of wheel this back, this started because I took a risk and I put the work in, and I'm so glad that I did. And I wake up every morning broker than I had been when I was, living or working for the airline, but I wake up happier than I've ever been either. And that is
Yeah.
a trade off I will never make ever again. Like I will never go back. And it's been floated. I've been asked to go back, and I've
Mm.
been
Really?
offered. Yeah, I have. I've been asked to go back, and I've been offered very lucrative stuff. But in my mind, I'm like, it is never worth waking up saying, like, fuck, I got to go into work. Like, I've never
Right.
done that. I've never woken up and said, "Fuck, I gotta record a video," or "Shit, I gotta talk about Flesh and Blood," or "I gotta
Oh,
do that." I
no.
haven't It's
Have to talk
never
about
occurred.
flesh and blood.
Yeah, it's
Dang.
never occurred,
Yeah.
but, yeah, I hope the ride never ends.
Yeah. And you've become pretty entwined with LSS, yeah? Like, I mean, you're not on, like, Brian Gottlieb levels of working for them or whatever, but
Nobody's on Brian Gottlieb level of anything. The guy is I met him this year, and I gotta tell you, like, Brian and I feel when it's like late at night and everybody's out partying, him and I are the ones in the corner being like, "God damn, I wish this was Ice Cube on the radio rather than whatever the fuck they're playing." We're having a drink and just talking about like, dude, like we could do this in our hotel rooms, like get a bottle of like whatever and go chill in the hotel room and like just have equally as much. Like him and I are kind of like the feeling like the grizzled vets as we're both approaching a certain age where we can be considered old, but Brian's awesome. But you're right.
He's a great dude.
Very sharp
Yeah,
dude, yeah.
Brian designs the cards and he's, you know, officially entwined with LSS.
Yeah, yeah. But so are you looking to the future? Is it all bright for you in terms of flesh and blood? Like, is it are you all excited? Is there anything you're worried about or wanna see?
The worry will never go away. And that's because I mean,
Because we
the
are
lot
have broken brains.
well, that's the problem. You're not
Yeah,
wrong. It's like I can come back from Worlds,
yeah,
have a great time. It's the most exposure I've had. People will say nice things. People say like, "Oh, you're the face of the game. You're this and that," which is incredible to think of, and it's also a lot of pressure at the same time
Mm.
of course.
because, I mean, all I need is for someone to overhear me say something, privately in a conversation somewhere, and then it's all over. But um there's for somebody who works from contract to contract, I'm not paid a salary, I'm paid a contract from event to event. So when people are
Sure.
like worried about when the next calling is, they're
Mm.
worried because they want to make sure that they can get the time off work and they can go. I'm worried because I want to know if I'll have a place to live because I can pay rent or not. Like
Oh,
that's
Absolutely.
yeah.
it for me. So I will say this, I mean, my relationship with LSS is I am technically employed by them to a degree. Like I work on a lot of their marketing stuff,
Mm.
to certain degrees, more media related. Like for
Cool.
instance, like there was that article that was in Polygon, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Big deal.
yeah, so that
We talked
was
about that.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that article in Polygon, that was myself who orchestrated that
You
and got
pitched
that
it?
done. Yeah, that was me. Stuff like that's part of it. So I work a lot behind the scenes. I don't know if that's going to change moving forward, but um, it's not like a big responsibility I have with them. I'm more of like a contractor that they've hired for a temporary period of time, saying here are the tasks that we need you to do, and we go from there. But
Right.
I always consider myself a broadcaster. If I in when we were negotiating and talking about this kind of stuff of me having some certain other responsibilities with LSS, for me, um, my number one caveat to them was if this has any effect on me casting events, immediately decline. I said
Mm.
I
Mm,
said my first and foremost thing is I want to cast and do the casting for every event you have. Obviously that's not going to happen, but
trying to be the
I said
John Madden of
basically, I
Fab,
said,
yeah.
"Send me
Mm.
anywhere. If there's an event on the fucking moon, like, we'll go. I will find a way. I will Uber there if necessary." But that was kind of the strategy. But my relationship with them now is that I'm more of a like media relations sort of thing, like writing press releases and stuff like that. But
We have
it
that
does
experience.
oh, it's great. I mean, I've had that experience when I was working for the airline. Like it
Yeah,
all
yeah,
kind of like but um, it
and
does
they need it.
afford me a nice little peel back of what's coming down the line that I can't talk about, but
Of course.
Sure, sure.
yeah, but it's nice. And trust me, they are very aware. They are very, very aware that any information that they're like, okay, here's what's coming, here's what you need to prep and whatever, you can't say anything. And I'm like, yeah, but you should probably tell people. That's why, for example, when I mentioned that Pro Tour 3 was going to be in the USA,
Yeah.
I didn't say it because I was speculating or that I was whatever. I knew that it was going to be in the USA because
You know where it
that's
is.
yeah, and the only reason I
Mm.
said it was because it was already released to the media outlets. So, I
Oh,
run this
okay.
all by them and I say, "Look, can I tell people or is this just for the media?" And they're like, "No, no. Like once you send it to the media, they can do with it what they want, but it's technically out there. You can say things." So,
Mhm.
I am constantly advocating and lobbying for whatever information they have to that is solidified and essentially set in stone to be made public so that all the antsiness and whatever gets sort of put to
People
bed.
definitely have
People get antsy. Yeah, you'll see like Brendan will be like, "Hayden, I need to know. I got to know when the next one is."
I
Like Matt
simply
Rogers
must
was tweeting
know.
about it. Like
Yeah.
people
So
get very yeah.
I know some things. I literally prior to this podcast recording, I wrote a pitch to them, or I had discussed the pitch to them where I'm like, here's your timeline, and there's a chunk of stuff that I think that like people are already kind of cracking the whip of saying, "Hey, give us something." And I think that even if it's breadcrumbs, you gotta give them some sort of little Trisket to munch on before there's a main course. And I promise you, the main course is going to be pretty delicious. But
There's some stuff I feel like you really have to weigh the balance between the hungry goblins of the fans like want everything now, and then there's you know I feel like
but
LSS is a little more tight-lipped than maybe they could be, but like there is a middle ground,
Mm.
and I feel like
there certainly is.
it's
Then
not just
again,
show all your cards on the table all the time.
no, because those cards can change. And this is what a lot of
Absolutely.
people don't
Yeah.
realize is that, well, why don't you tell us? Well, they don't tell you because it's not set in stone. So what are they going to do? Tell you something that has a 20% probability of maybe shifting either the date or the venue, and suddenly all like you've just made plans and now
Right.
things
Mhm.
go awry. Look what happened to the like in the UK for nationals. That was out of their how can you foresee that? How can you,
Yeah.
prognosticate
Yeah.
that? And it was a nightmare. And like that was just a logistical nightmare based on what happened. So they don't want to put out stuff that isn't already set in stone. And organizing a massive tournament for thousands of people to attend across the world is not an easy feat.
And then having
Um,
an exact day 6 months in advance, like,
you
it's tough. That
Mhm.
sounds
you
insane.
can't do that exactly. And that's why, and at the same time, they don't want to release an official thing and saying, "Hey, here's one little thing that is set in stone," and everyone's like, "Well, what about the rest of the shit?" So
Mm.
they want to sort of package it together as like
Right.
a roadmap to a degree. But in the meantime, there are things that are solidified, and I have actively lobbied them to say, "Let's give." Like a little early Christmas present, like a little Black Friday, Cyber Monday kind of drop for them, for people to say, "Hey, here's at least what you like, here's a broader stroke and we'll fill in the details, but here's the framework." And I think that's coming out soon, and I'm hoping
Awesome.
it does
Okay.
because there's some g- there's what I wrote that I want people to know, and then it has to go through essentially the like defensive line of
The chain, yeah.
LSS people who exactly. It might
Yeah.
get stuffed at the, it might get stuffed at the, at the line of scrimmage, or it might be a first down. I don't know, but my fingers
Yeah.
are crossed that there's some like positive yardage gain on this
Mhm.
play.
Yeah.
Icelander might play Hypothermia from Arsenal. Suddenly it doesn't have Go again. They might play Blizzard. You got to pay into it extra.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Now it can't
Precisely.
resolve. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
that's
basically presented lethal and
Mhm.
against an Icelander with Stormstrider, so I'm
Yeah.
crossing my fingers.
I'm very patient. I mean, I'm a person who like I don't want there to be more than 3 sets a year. I don't want there to be more than 2 you know what I mean? Like I like having the pace we're on now. The amount of events is what I can keep up with. I can't imagine somebody who's got like 2, 3 different card games going on.
Yeah, that
Like
seems so
that's
tough to
crazy
imagine.
to me.
A card game like Flesh and Blood really, if you get deep into it, it takes over your brain in this way where you're like always thinking about different decks and the new cards
Yeah, I
and
have a
like
job. I I have a regular job and a band, and I have,
or
like,
even just like
stuff.
other hobbies. It's like video games or
No,
something.
I
It's
this is
like
mostly my only hobby now.
well, sure. But that's what I mean. It's like I don't know how you fit like Flesh and Blood and then are also like I'm also gonna get really into
I'm also really into magic.
Weiss Schwartz or Yu-Gi-Oh or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The funniest part is like when somebody comes over and sees like the guitar in the corner. They're like, "Oh, do you play?" I'm like, "I used to before Flesh and Blood. Like I used to. It's just not the thing." And like you mentioned, like this is my job. Like my job is
Yeah,
to actively stay on like on the rails with not just Flesh and Blood, but for instance, like this past month has been like a quite the roller coaster in the sense of after Worlds, I had 2 weeks to prepare for a brand new card game that I had never played in my life because I was casting their World Championship here in Toronto. It was a game called Genesis Battle of
Genesis,
Champions.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I spent that whole 2 week process basically learning the game, watching video, playing the game, understanding meta personalities, the people, the players, the histories, the matchups. And then I casted that and I was like, okay, whew, like that's done. Oh wait, Gwent World Championships is in 2 weeks. I gotta get back on that. So I gotta get back to a level where I feel comfortable broadcasting that game. And when that's done, I can finally say I can give Magic 100%, not Magic. I can give Flesh and Blood 100% of my focus because ProQuest season's around the corner. And fuck's sake, I as much as I cast them around the game, I don't play nearly as much as I would love to. ProQuest
Sure.
season for me
Mhm.
is the highest level of compete that I can um, join into because most callings and battle hardens and stuff, I'm either working them or they're too far and I can't make them. So
Mm.
I after Gwent next weekend, I'm legitimately in full hardcore training mode for ProQuest because I intend on winning a ProQuest again. That's my move. Like that's my world championship.
I would love to win a
I'd love
ProQuest.
to win a ProQuest.
That would
You
be
say
great.
again? You've won a ProQuest already?
I have a yeah, I won
Nice.
one in Toronto. Well, okay, so all transparency aside, I went
I cheated.
pretty I completely cheated. Yeah. I played Seeds Chain, no one caught
Yeah,
me.
I have 30
Uh
Seeds of Agony in my deck. I played them all in one turn.
so I made it to the final. I was incredibly confident. I think I had lost one game that didn't mean anything. I think it was like it was like rounds. It was the last round of Swiss. I was 5-0. I think I lost that last round, and I not that I didn't give a shit, but I was like, it didn't matter to me because I
Mhm.
also in my mind had completely discounted the fact that I didn't expect myself to even get to the finals. I was playing in
Right.
Toronto against people like Isaac Root, Matt Dilks, all these like
God.
really world class amazing players. But um, so when I got to the finals, like that was I already knew that I was working the events, like the Pro Tour and all that stuff like that. So
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't even like attend or anything.
Mm,
So we basically split. They got the PTI, they got the invite.
Mhm.
I got the gold foil, and we split the rest of the stuff essentially down the middle.
nice.
So did I technically win? I don't think I wouldn't I can't say that I won. If we played it, can I think that I won? I think I would have won because they were
You didn't play the game?
I didn't the game wasn't even played.
You didn't play
Oh,
it out. I'd wanna
We
play it
didn't
out
play it.
still, even if I was splitting, I
Yeah.
think.
It was just that it was fucking late and I was like
Sure.
tired and to me my goal was
dude,
just the top
that's
8.
enough. That's the fact that you got to the point where you're splitting,
Yeah.
like, that's you win.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Yeah,
win the
so I
game.
can't say that I won uh but I can say that I got the gold foil. So,
That's the same thing to me.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Wait, do they give a PTI or it's a just to the Pro Tour,
It's just
right?
an invite to that specific Pro Tour because a
Yeah.
PTI is, like, even more
Right.
valuable
So
and
it's
harder to get.
I don't know what the technical terminology is, but ultimately it was to go to New Jersey to compete in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's interesting is the team that did it were from my hometown, Montreal. Excuse me, from Montreal, and I had spoken to them all leading up to like or all through that tournament. And I think I had played one of them from their team, and I think I beat from one of them from their team, and most of them were on the same list. So I was like, I can beat them. Like I've beat them before. But what's interesting was that the dude that I was in the finals with uh, I think a few of the others from their team all had invites, and he was the only one who didn't. So
Mm.
I was like, I'm not gonna cock block
Take it
you,
away.
you know?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm like, let's just settle this now. And it's like it was like 9:30 or 10 at night. I was hungry, and I'm like, let's. I don't even want to play the game, dude. Like he's like, nah, we're good. So they it was interesting because it was like an episode of like some legal drama where we were both sitting at the table and they like wrote something on a paper, folded it, and slid it over, which was their offer.
Oh,
And they're
okay.
like,
Interesting.
yeah, and
I
they're like,
take
yeah,
invitation, you
Mhm.
take
and it
gold foil.
was, which was cool because the offer was like I get 2 playmats and they get a bunch of money and the invite, and I was like, "How about you take one of the playmats and I take half the money and like we just split everything down." And they're like, "Yeah, that's fair." So that's kind of how it went down,
Nice.
which
Mhm.
was fascinating. But
I
yeah, like my
definitely
goal is to just outright win one. Like I want to go and outright win one, and I'm confident that I can. I'm actually going to Minneapolis for my birthday in January, and I'm going to
ooh.
be playing at a ProQuest there. So
Yeah, I really want I mean, I've won 1 skirmish, I top 4'd a skirmish, I've
Mhm.
won 1 armory. I'm not very good, but I also just started, so
Yeah. Well, you're good, and you've continued playing Kano despite the fact that like half of our local scene loves Dromai.
yeah.
So you're constantly going into a
oh,
really bad
why are you
matchup.
bringing fire Pokemon to the water gym? Like, what are you
I know,
doing, dude?
She can't be helped. She loves
I
Kano.
beat it I did it once, and I just wanna keep doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a great time. Yeah, so I'm very excited for ProQuest. So this is your playing time. You get a couple months of actually being a player.
Well, it's playing time in the same regard. Like I play a bunch because I play to prepare for casting. Like I
Mhm.
play
Right, of course.
matchups, I watch matchups. But when it comes to actual compete where there's stakes on the line, so to speak, ProQuest is essentially like my World Series because I don't play in the major callings. I've played in one or two Battle Hardens. I think I played in one Battle Harden in my life where it was at Philadelphia like a year ago,
Mhm.
where Tommy Fresh, Nick Bolas, and I got quite inebriated the night before,
Wasted.
where I
Sure.
I had to drop because I puked. Like I went and
Oh no.
Oh
I puked
no.
in a Wawa parking lot. I had to drop and leave the tournament that I was still very much alive in because I was going to probably get an IP infinite by puking all over the table. So I left, and it was the right move
Christ.
because I lasted 30 minutes later that I was in a Wawa parking lot with my buddy Nick Bolas going inside to get me Gatorade, and I puked. I opened the car door and puked out the side because I was like, "This is bad. This is bad."
One night with Tommy Fresh, your whole tournament chances are dashed.
I fully blame him because he's like, this is to quote Tommy Fresh, like, oh, they have the beer that I work for here, so it could all be a business expense. I was like, oh Lord, no God, no.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
That does sound dangerous. Tommy Fresh being like every round, this round's on me to quote a card. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, you're drawing the extra card, but then you're getting the -1. You're not at full power the next day.
Not at all.
All right. Well, I have so many more things I'd like to talk to you about, but it has been an hour and I should let you go. So, thank you so much, Matt, for coming on our show. Would you like to plug anything before you go?
Let's see. You can follow me on Twitter at Watch Flake, on Twitch occasionally. I suppose I don't really stream much anymore. Twitch.tv/WatchFlake. My videos, my podcast, most of that stuff is on YouTube. YouTube.com/983media is the media house that produces my content.
The
And
Instant Speed
outside from that,
Podcast.
Mhm.
yeah, and the Instant Speed podcast. That's sort of my main mojo. But ultimately, I just tell people like, just if you like the positivity of the community, I mean, just perpetuate it, just
Jump in.
support it, promote it, and that's and jump in exactly.
Yeah.
And
Are you and
I'm
Steven doing a show?
so Steven and
Yeah,
I.
yeah.
Steven was one of the people who was co-casting the Genesis World Championships with me. He flew to
Yeah,
Toronto, which
yeah.
was awesome. And we were just shooting the shit because, again, we're at that venue for 2 straight days of like 10 plus hours or whatever. And with the downtime, we're just like discussing stuff, and we were always looking for a way to collaborate. And I told him about an old podcast that I did with some local friends of mine here that I no longer do, but I was adoring the concept. And if anybody finds my old YouTube channel that I don't maintain, you might be able to find this 10 episodes of this podcast. But it's not a card related thing, it's merely a thought experiment type podcast that is super hilarious. And I
Okay.
told him
Okay.
about it, and he was like, dude, we need to do this. I said, I think we do need to do this. So
Okay.
that is, I think, something that we're going to look into in December to start rolling with. But
Wow.
like most people, if it's not card related, they won't give a shit, but I don't give a crap because it's like it was such a fun experience. So him and I are going to be working on that.
I'm excited to know what it is. Stay tuned for that as well. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been Banish Zone. You can follow me at Banish Zone on Twitter. I'm Bryn. You can follow Chris at Blue Plunder Run
Mhm.
on Twitter. like and subscribe or whatever, and we will see you next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.